Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us. The webinar will start in 2 minutes. As participants continue to join, please ensure that your microphone is muted. And in the meantime, please introduce yourself, your name, and wherever you're joining us from in the chat box. Would like to meet you. My name is Faith. I'm joining from Nigeria, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's webinar. Thank you. Please let's drop our names. Let's introduce ourselves in the chat box. Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us once again. Thank you very much. Would like to meet you, like I said. Please introduce yourself. I see Alice Alma from Philippines, Karen from Cape Town, South Africa. Please let's keep dropping our names while we wait for our other participants to join. And you can reach out to your colleagues, let them know that we are now live. We've started the webinar. Please share the link with your colleagues, with your network. Let them know we are live. Our participants is quite low today. Let's give everyone we are live. Please let's try to share the link to our network. Let's share on LinkedIn. We've also posted on LinkedIn. Please engage with our post. Share we are live. We are live now, and encourage your colleagues and friends to join. Thank you for joining. Thank you. Azim from Jordan, thank you for joining. Reward from Zimbabwe, thank you for joining. Thank you for just keep dropping our names and wherever we're joining from. We would like to meet us. In the next 1 minute, we'll be starting the webinar. But in the meantime, let's get to know each other. Okay, Samuel from South Africa. Thank you for joining. It's nice to have you here. Once again, my name is Faith. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar, and I am joining from Nigeria. I am a research and project officer at Get Consortium. Okay, Dr. Ravi from South Korea. Good day, everyone, once again. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you very much for joining, and we'll start the webinar immediately. On behalf of the Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium, GET, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all to the July edition of the GET webinar series. My name is Faith Omlade Adebayo, and I would be your moderator for today's session. And on behalf of GET, I want to warmly welcome everyone for joining us from across Africa and around the world. So we sincerely appreciate you. We appreciate you taking your time to be a part of this important discussion. And I would also like to extend our heartfelt appreciation to our distinguished speakers. Thank you very much for graciously accepting our invitation. We have Dr. Karen Fina joining us. We have Stavros Nicholas. Thank you for joining us. And we have Dr. Ravi Ganapati. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, one of our speakers, Dr. Cecilia Wanjala, would not be able to join us for today's webinar. But regardless, we still have quite a number of speakers and giving us their expert perspective this afternoon. Once again, thank you very much. Before we begin, please allow me to introduce GET briefly. The Global Emerging Pathogens Treatment Consortium, GET, was established in 2014 in response, as a direct response to the 2014-2016 Ebola virus disease outbreak in West Africa. GET is legally registered in Nigeria. We are registered in Accra, Ghana. We are registered in Sierra Leone, and we're also registered in the United States of America. Our primary mission is to develop African-led Afrocentric strategies to effectively address emerging biosecurity threats within a global context. So we collaborate with different organizations, both within and outside Africa. And our core activities include capacity building, research, logistics, publications, community engagement, and policy advocacy. So why are we having this webinar today? The COVID-19 pandemic has changed how the world thinks about vaccine. We now know that vaccine is very, very important, and it has exposed the inequalities in vaccine access and highlighted Africa's dependence on external manufacturers, especially during public health emergencies. So while Africa is a home to nearly one-fifth of the world's population, its manufacturing capacity still remains very little. And at the same time, recent Ebola outbreaks, Mpox, Marburg, Cholera, and yellow fever continue to remind us that preparedness cannot begin when an outbreak starts. It has to be a long built thing before the emergency, which is why strengthening Africa's vaccine future is very, very important, even more than manufacturing. It requires a resilient immunization system, sustainable financing, and enabling policies, strong partnerships, public confidence in vaccine, and the ability to rapidly respond to emerging and re-emerging infectious disease threats. And this theme are reflected in today's program, which is why GET is convening this webinar, which is themed Strengthening Africa's Vaccine Future, Local Manufacturing, Immunization Systems, and Outbreak Preparedness. Before we continue, I would like to mention a few housekeeping rules. Like I mentioned earlier, please introduce yourself in the chat box. Let us know wherever you're joining from. And kindly do well to share the webinar with your network, your colleagues and friends. Let them know that we are live and encourage them to join. And would also encourage your participation and engagement throughout the session. You can drop your thoughts, your comments in the chat box, and all questions should be directed to the Q&A section, which should be taken after the after all speakers have presented. Please ensure your questions are directed to the Q&A box so it doesn't get lost in the chat. Also, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available on our YouTube channel at the end of the webinar. Thank you once again for joining us. We are so glad to have you with us, and we would now begin with our discussion. To start the discussion today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Karen Fena. She is the Executive Director of the Global mRNA Technology Transfer and Training Hub at Afrigen Biologics. She is a WHO-led public-private partnership advancing mRNA vaccine development and manufacturing across Africa and other low and middle-income countries. Prior to this role, she led Afrigen's research and development portfolio, seeing scientific and technical operations in vaccine and therapeutic development. Dr. Fena previously held a research position at the Center for Bioprocess Engineering Research at the University of Cape Town, where she specialized in biomanufacturing, recombinant proteins, and enzyme technology. She is an accomplished researcher and educator, and she has led funded research projects. She has supervised postgraduate students and also co-authored numerous peer-reviewed publications in biotechnology and vaccine development. Today, she'll be speaking on strategies for accelerating local vaccine manufacturing in Africa to improve vaccine security and equitable access. Thank you so much, Dr. Fena, for honoring our invitation. We are so glad to have you. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Faith, and good day to everybody joining us online and to my fellow panel members. I'm just going to get my slides up. Okay, so as Faith has said, I've been asked today to focus on strategies for accelerating local manufacturing. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time just talking around the program that we've been involved in with the WHO and the Medicines Patent Pool and some of the lessons that we've actually learned over the last 5 years. I am from Afrigen Biologics, as Faith mentioned. We're based in Cape Town in South Africa, and we were established with a main mission around local production capacity. With the question, how do we advance local vaccine manufacturing and development? And our core platform that we started with was around 2016 when we became operational, and we established the first adjuvant formulation center. We've walked quite a journey since then. And in 2021, we became the host of the WHO Medicines Patent Pool Technology Transfer and Training Program, which is a part of the... I think I have stopped sharing my slides, sorry. Okay, which was part of the initiative out of the pandemic. And that was about how do we make sure that low middle income countries are capacitated to respond to pandemics. And more recently, one of the things that we're very proud of is that Afrigen has recently attained our accreditation from the South African Health Product Regulatory Authority, and that is to manufacture biological materials for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. Many of you are aware of the Africa Continental Strategy, which is about ensuring that, or that striving towards making 60% of the vaccines that we need by 2040. So I'm sure that this slide is familiar to many of you. And it's been kind of driven by the African Union and Africa CDC through the platform for harmonized African health product manufacturing. This was an extensive study that was done or commissioned through the Africa CDC, and looking at on this top line here, what are our priority diseases, and you can see that they're categorized into legacy, expanding, and outbreak. And for many of these, there are no vaccines for these disease targets. And there has been a great sort of acknowledgement that in order to address these priorities, that we need to have a combination approach in terms of technology platforms and vaccine modalities. But since I am going to talk from the RNA point of view, it was important for us, to note that RNA and other nucleotide-based platforms are also part of this endeavor, and that while in Africa, while we have quite a big capacity for full finish, we need to be able to make our own drug substance, and we need to support the pipeline with a strong R&D network around the manufacturers. So the program that we've been leading, the mRNA Technology Transfer Program, is quite a unique program in the sense that it consists of a multitude of manufacturers in low middle income countries, and then the central hub, which facilitates the technology transfer. And it is a multilateral tech transfer based on a platform approach. So based on a platform, and then later on product-specific tech transfers can occur. And this is one of the largest tech transfers, multilateral tech transfers that has happened. So the tech transfer network consists of three core elements. The first being the South African Consortium, which is the host of the tech transfer programs, if I can put it that way, consisting of Afrigen, and our role was to develop the platform and to transfer to the partners, BioVac, which is also a pharmaceutical vaccine company in Cape Town. Their role was to industrialize and further scale up the process, and the South African Medical Research Council, which is overseeing an integrated research and development program in order to support the regional effort. And then we have all the manufacturing partners. I'm going to show you a slide later which shows you where they all are. And their role is to receive the tech transfer and to ensure that they could, have a sustainable business model around which kinds of vaccine products they were going to take forward using the platform. And then there's been R&D consortia, which has been facilitated through the Medicines Patent Pool. You can see here where they are located, and they were put together in order to support the manufacturers in those various countries. In Afrigen, so this is a snapshot of our facility. So we really are a boutique pilot facility, so just 2,000 meters squared. But an important aspect of this facility is that we are able to do end-to-end development and manufacturing. So we can make the mRNA drug substance, we can formulate it into drug product, and we can full finish it. And we also have the capabilities to do all our quality control testing in-house, as well as stability program. And this is really important for development. So to take vaccines that have been developed early in R&D and then to put them forward in a translational GMP space. When we started working on the program, we had to develop the technology from scratch. So this picture shows you the high-level process train that we have for mRNA. It consists of starting with a pDNA material and then using a enzymatic process called in vitro transcription, where the pDNA is then converted into mRNA, and then we have a series of purification processes, which are really important to remove any impurities, especially double-stranded RNA, which can cause reactogenicity. And then to take it into a lipid nanoparticle in order to protect the mRNA. It is then further purified and with the addition of sucrose as a preservative, and then fill and finish. We also have a semi-automated system for making mRNA, and this is working with a Belgian company called Quantum, and they have developed a semi-automated system which essentially takes all these steps here highlighted in green and combines it into an automated system to deliver the mRNA drug substance. All of this is supported by Afrigen's quality management system. And like I said, we have the ability to do from early R&D all the way through to actually manufacturing clinical batches. And in the process development, we started at so for those of you that are in universities and in research centers, interesting to note that we started at very small scale, so 200 microliters, and now we have taken the process to the larger scale, which is appropriate for phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials. So we've done that for the drug substance as well as for the drug product. For the drug product, where we use lipid nanoparticles for the encapsulation of the mRNA, there are different ways that you can do that. You can do it using microfluidic devices and impingement jet mixing, which is what we have used. And we have been able to scale up this process. It's more of a scale out process with the impingement jet mixing. We also needed to develop a analytics platform. So there are some compendial methods which we could refer to the European Pharmacopoeia or to the USP, but the majority of the analytics that were developed were non-compendial. So these included about 14 different methods. And the reason why we can say that it is an analytics platform, so to say, is that when you change different disease targets encoded in the mRNA, that there are only just these 3 or 4 assays that need to be updated or sort of re-optimized because they are specifically related to the gene of interest. So this is what also contributes to the mRNA suitability in terms of a rapid response. So if I can go back to the previous slide. So in terms of the manufacturing platform, as you change out disease targets, these unit operations remain the same. And so it means that you can actually go really quickly in the case of a pandemic. And the same applies to the analytics platform. We also obviously need to test out your vaccine in a preclinical studies before you can proceed into first in human trials. And so you need to demonstrate a number of endpoints, which include immunogenicity. So I'm just going to highlight a few of them. So immunogenicity, which would include binding antibodies and neutralizing antibodies. We also want to have a look at the quality of the immune response in terms of Th1 versus Th2. We can look at pro-inflammatory cytokines, and then also look at protection. So protection against challenge in small animals as well as in non-human primates, where depending on which is the best model, which is appropriate for sort of pathogenesis, mimicking pathogenesis that is found in the human body. And then also to do toxicology studies. So this is a GLP study, typically done in rats or in rabbits, and it's on the critical path to your first in human clinical trial. I mentioned earlier about the partner network, the 15 different partners. This is the map which shows you where they're all located. And unfortunately, our colleague, Dr. Cecilia from BioVax Kenya, can't be here today, but Kenya is one of the partners. So there's 6 partners in Africa. So South Africa being one of them. And then we have Nigeria, Senegal, Egypt, Tunisia, and Kenya. And then you can see that we have 2 partners in South America, the rest are in Southeast Asia, and 2 in the old Eastern Bloc being Ukraine and Serbia. And so when Afrigen started this program, we had 2 rounds of training in Afrigen, the first being just a short intro into how you make mRNA and how you test it on a small scale. And then as part of the tech transfer demonstration, all these partners came back to Afrigen where we had hands-on training on the process at scale for phase 1 clinical trials. And now the partners are in the process of demonstrating the tech transfer that they received in their own facilities, and that should be completed by the end of this year. And so part of the tech transfer it's very comprehensive. So when Afrigen developed the technology, we had to have an internal tech transfer from our R&D facility into our GMP facility, and all the documentation. So just to give you an idea of all the different things, this is not a comprehensive list, but just to demonstrate that there's a considerable amount of documentation that goes into this. All of these documents that we use to transfer into our own GMP facility is what was also transferred externally to our partners, the ones that I've shown you just recently in the previous slide. And so it has been quite a interesting process. It has been very complex, and I thought that in terms of the discussion today, what kind of lessons have we learned from the program that can be taken forward? Some of the key things are that technology transfer, which is one vehicle that we can use in order to increase local and regional manufacturing capacity, is that it takes longer than you anticipate. But what it did for us in the sense that we had to first develop the technology from scratch and then transfer to the partners is that we had deeply embedded know-how. We shouldn't underestimate the impact of tacit knowledge. So this is, information that isn't easily conveyed in documentation, but that it has to be conveyed from person to person. And so often we say that, tech transfer happens on 2 feet, and that's really important. In this multilateral tech transfer that we participated in, we did a flexible kind of tech transfer as opposed to a like-for-like tech transfer. And the flexibility was required because certain of the manufacturers in the network were more mature in terms of their biomanufacturing capabilities. And then there were others that were just starting out sort of greenfields projects. So those that were more mature could, repurpose their facilities and repurpose equipment that they had. And so that flexibility was very useful, but it also brings another layer of complexity in the tech transfer. I think that probably some of the speakers after me are going to touch on some of the things that I've highlighted, but I guess there's huge value in the partnerships. We can't do this on our own. We have to rely on partnerships to accelerate local and regional manufacturing. And so we need public-private partnerships to de-risk investments in facilities, in workforce development. I think that Dr. Ravi, our IBI colleague, might speak a little bit about what they're doing with the Achieve program in terms of workforce development. We also need to have partnerships with multilateral agencies, which would include finance institutions, companies that have originator products that can be licensed, and working with various CDMOs and research institutions. And we need an integrated ecosystem. So you'll see when I show you some of the other slides how Afrigen has partnered with others in the network to complete sort of an integrated ecosystem. And then I think very important for Africa is that we need to have a coordinated effort in terms of the continental strategy, and that countries should work together and coordinate. And one aspect of this, I'm sure others are going to touch on it, is regulatory harmonization, sharing talent pipelines, and so forth. So in Afrigen, and I think this is applicable to everybody in terms of sustainability for local manufacturing, is that we can't just have manufacturing facilities. We also need to keep on innovating. And we need to have a pipeline of products that can sustain the manufacturers. And so in Afrigen, we continue to build the platform. We continue to innovate so that we have freedom to operate and so that we have sustainability. And so these are the various arms that we are focused on. And I'm going to just quickly highlight some of the disease targets that we've been working on. So we did an extensive study on what kind of disease targets should we be focusing on here in the sort of sub-Saharan African. What are the priorities for Gavi, for WHO, for CEPI and other funders, for the Africa CDC through the Partners for Africa Harmonization Program. And we also looked at what kinds of accessibility and availability do we have for specific antigens? Do we know their correlates of immunity? Do we have assays developed? Do we have the right animal models? Where can we attract funding? So this is why we needed to look at, the priorities for the different funding organizations. And through this matrix, we then came up with a few different targets that we are focusing on, and obviously targets such as TB and HIV, because we have such a high burden of disease, it was important for us to include that as well. And so our pipeline includes SARS-CoV-2, which we used as a proof of concept product to develop the platform. And then we've included RSV. So even though there are products on the market globally for RSV, we think that it's imperative for us to have, a product that is going to be available to Africa and to other low middle income countries. We're working on Rift Valley fever, which is a great disease target to work on, both from a human health point of view as well as from an animal health point of view. Gonorrhea, which is a very big global problem. Mpox. So Faith was talking about, the Ebola outbreaks and that get, kind of started out of that. We've also now had COVID, we've got Mpox and now a new Ebola outbreak. So it's really important for us to we've selected our disease targets, also demonstrating that you can use the RNA platform for different disease targets, not just viral pathogens, but also bacterial pathogens. And so gonorrhea being one of them, and then TB. So we have quite a flagship project around development of TB vaccines using the mRNA platform. And this just shows you the extent of the funders that we've been working with and all the partners in the network. And this is my last slide, which is just about taking the mRNA program forward. So this program will extend for another 5 years until 2030. And the aim is really around sustainability and ensuring that all the partners can take their mRNA vaccine products into the clinic. We are focused on reducing the cost of mRNA vaccines, so looking at innovative technologies and how we can do that. Um, and yeah, and also looking at how we can take the mRNA platform and use it for the production of therapeutic mRNA products. So the platform is able to do that, and balancing sort of the being able to be ready for pandemic response, but also ensuring that we have a basket of products that brings sustainability so that manufacturers are actually able to, to keep their facilities up and running and that they actually survive for the future. So, and then lastly, this is my last slide, just to say that, this program, which has been a very good example of how, tech transfer and training can be successful, that it was only possible because there was such a coordinated effort and also because we had such a lot of support at various different levels. So we had, the program was well supported with funding, but we also had support from apart from various governments, from philanthropies, we had support from civil society, we had technology suppliers and collaborations across different biotech partners, and Afrigen was very well supported by our local universities in South Africa, as well as some international organizations, including the NIH and the Vaccine Research Center. So it really has been a coordinated effort, and I think that we give our thanks to the global partnerships as well as the amazing people in Afrigen who were able to make this happen. So I'm going to end my talk there, and I believe that there are going to be questions that are held for the end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fena, for that excellent and insightful presentation. Please let's appreciate our speaker. Let's give her a round of applause with the emoji or show her some love. Appreciate her. Thank you very much, our speaker. We are glad to have you. You've shown us that strengthening Africa vaccine, it goes beyond building manufacturing facilities. It requires scientific expertise, investing in technology transfer, fostering strategic partnership. You majorly emphasized on strategic partnership, and you said we should create sustainable innovation ecosystem. You also showed us the progress you've made with the other partnerships you've made with mRNA Technology Transfer Hub, and you've shown us how collaboration can accelerate local vaccine production while also improving the equitable access across Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you very much. Thank you for reminding us that local manufacturing is not just about producing vaccine. It is about building a long-term capacity, resilience, and self-reliance. So thank you so much once again. And right now we'll be moving on to our second speaker for today, person of Mr. Stavros, is the Group Senior Executive for Strategic Trade Development at Aspen Pharma Care Holdings Limited. He is a member of the Aspen Group Executive Committee with nearly 34 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry. He has played a pivotal role in expanding access to medicine across Africa, including introducing the continent's first generic antiretroviral medicine through Aspen. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, he helped coordinate South Africa's business response and served on the National COVID-19 Vaccine Coordinating Committee. Is an internationally recognized healthcare leader and is passionate is a passionate advocate for local pharmaceutical manufacturing, strategic partnerships, and improving equitable access to healthcare across Africa and emerging markets. Today, we'll be speaking on building sustainable vaccine ecosystem in Africa, strengthening partnership, investment, and market access. Thank you very much, Stavros, for accepting our invitation. And I sincerely apologize if I have pronounced your name wrongly. Please pardon me. Thank you once again for accepting our invitation. You now have the floor. Over to you.
Okay, Madam Program Director and colleagues that are on the call, my fellow esteemed panelists, good afternoon. If you're in a different time zone, good morning. It's a great and wonderful pleasure to participate in what is one of the most critical topics that we can discuss in the African continent. So this cuts across many different sectors and many different spheres of both business and government. And I think we need to view it as an apex priority for the African continent. I'm going to cover my presentation in two parts. I'm going to firstly speak a little about Aspen and our activity and presence in vaccines and other biologics for that matter. And then secondly, I'm going to reinforce a 4-point plan on how we can give speed, momentum, and acceleration to Africa's vaccine, and for that matter, other medical countermeasure and pharmaceuticals ambitions. Now, we should take our cue, and the fulcrum in all of this is the African Union Head of State Bureau meeting of 10 May 2022, and the recordal of those minutes, which were presented on the 17th of May 2022. What did that resolution state? Let me precisely state what it said. It said that Africa should be producing 60% of its vaccines, later expanded to include pharmaceuticals, by 2040, meaning that Africa should be procuring 60% of its requirements, of vaccine requirements from African producers by 2040. Now, 2040 is not that far away if you think about it. It's a mere 14 and a half years away or less. So we need to give speed and momentum to this Apex initiative of Africa. And now let me go back to what I was saying earlier, a little about Aspen and our capabilities on the African continent. I think those of you who are versed with Aspen will know that we are Africa's and the Southern Hemisphere's largest pharmaceutical company. We have a global footprint that extends to 60 countries around the world. We're very proud of that footprint because we started off from a 2-bedroom house in a coastal city in South Africa called Durban. And the main bedroom was marketing and sales, and the second bedroom was where we ran finance and admin. So that was 28 years ago. We started from very humble beginnings, and I think we're certainly very proud of the achievement that we are now one of South Africa's most globalized and one of Africa's most globalized companies. And we have, as I said, a global footprint that extends to 60 countries and beyond. We also have a significant manufacturing footprint. We have factories in Brazil, a very significant and important manufacturing facility in France that we own. That facility is one of the most important injectable facilities on the European continent. We have a facility in Germany, 3 factories in the Netherlands. Our Dutch capabilities include biochemical API manufacture and hormonal API and finished dose form manufacture as well. Why do I mention biochem? Because we are the largest suppliers in the world outside of the United States of general anesthetic and neuromuscular blockers. I think that's a very significant achievement for any African company. No one would expect that one of the largest global suppliers of what are complex products to manufacture, such as anesthetics, are being made here on, or at least a big part of what we supply globally is made here on the foot of the African continent. We number 2 or 3, depending on um, which month you look at. We are either number 2 or 3 in the world in injectable thrombosis, and that includes low molecular weight heparin products. I don't have to remind anyone on this call that um, heparin is a complex product to manufacture. It originates from porcine mucosa. That's the mucosa of pigs, and that's the early stage. And we own a factory in the United States that does this early stage development for heparin, and then it gets transferred to our Dutch facility and then onto our French facility for manufacture. So heparin is a biologic, and it's very important that I did present our capabilities around biologics in the context of today's seminar. I should also state that anesthetics are complex sterile products, and there's a big element of discussion around sterile capabilities as well, and again, in the context of today's conversation. Now, let me move into, we have manufacturing in India, and we recently sold our Asia Pacific business, or part of it. That means we sold our Australian, New Zealand, Thai, Singaporean, Malaysian, and Filipino business. We sold those some time ago, so we don't have manufacture any longer in Australia, but we did have manufacture in Australia, and at that time we were actually the 6th largest pharmaceutical company in Australia. Now, lastly, on the African continent, what does our manufacturing footprint look like? We have significant manufacturing capabilities in Kenya and Tanzania, a very small facility, liquids facility in Ghana, and then our flagship facilities are found in South Africa. We have a fine chemicals facility in Cape Town, which is largely an export capability. And then we have a domestic facility to service the domestic market in East London. And then in a coastal town called Gqeberha, we have our flagship facility. This is the jewel in the crown of Aspen's manufacturing. It consists of 6 different factories or facilities. And in that facility, we pioneered the first ever generic antiretrovirals. And today it is a facility that is known for its sterile capabilities. And the first COVID vaccine on the African continent and in the Southern Hemisphere was produced at that facility. It was done so in 2021. And it was a contract manufacturing arrangement that Aspen had with Johnson & Johnson. And we produced under contract CMO manufacture the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which was the vaccine of choice on the African continent. To give you a sense of our capabilities, at the time, we produced in 12 months 230 million doses of the J&J COVID vaccine. So the point I'm trying to make by taking you through our footprint is that we should never ever doubt the capabilities that exist on the African continent. I've demonstrated a few points to you here. The first is that we are global leaders in general anesthesia. Our biggest product there is propofol, and our brand there is Diprivan, and Diprivan is a leading global general anesthetic brand. We are also world leaders in injectable thrombosis. And then we have invested significantly in sterile capabilities. To give you a sense, we have capability to fill 1.3 billion doses. So we could, technically speaking, if you wanted to look at it like that, one dose per one African. The population of Africa is around 1.4 billion people today. I can also tell you, because we're talking biologics, that Aspen has successfully contract manufactured human insulin for and on behalf of Novo Nordisk. I don't need to remind anyone on this call that Novo Nordisk is the world's second largest pharmaceutical company by market capitalization after Eli Lilly. Eli Lilly is number one, Novo Nordisk is number two, and Aspen bears a partnership with both Lilly. We have the commercial rights to Lilly's products in South Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, which included, incidentally, the launch of Mounjaro, which is the world's leading GLP-1 product and now the world's largest product. And we have also manufactured human insulin for Novo Nordisk at the same facility in Quebec. So I'm trying to demonstrate what capabilities, expertise, skills, and capacities exist on our continent. We have filed with WHO PQ hexavalent, which is a very important routine pediatric vaccine that is coming to the fore. And by the looks of things, we might be and should be the first African vaccine producer to successfully PQ a routine vaccine through the accelerated or parallel review process that the WHO and our domestic regulator are offering. There will be other companies, of course, that will follow us, such as our colleagues at BioVac, our colleagues at Institut Pasteur have previously supplied yellow fever, and I think will continue to do so. So it's important, again, as I keep saying, that we demonstrate what the capabilities are on the southern tip of Africa and beyond. It's also important that we bring into context that the continent imports, at this point in time, 99% of its vaccines. It's counterintuitive. It's sometimes astonishing to think that the continent that consumes 1.2 to 1.3 billion doses of vaccines, I'm excluding any COVID vaccines from that, is importing 99% of those. It's an untenable, unsustainable position, and one that we speak a lot about, but we don't see a lot of progress. And that's where I'm going to focus the second part of my discussion on how do we start putting score on the board? How do we start achieving successes with our vaccine ambitions in Africa? And again, just to cite, our ambition as a continent is that by 2040, 60% of our demand and requirements for vaccines on our own continent should be procured from African producers. It is, again, unthinkable and often unspeakable that we have outsourced 1.2 to 1.3 billion doses of vaccines to other continents and other geographies, and we are not producing them here ourselves in our own continent. So let me move on, colleagues, into the second part of what I wanted to discuss, and that is I've painted a very realistic picture. It's a picture where the continent and many partners around the world all say that we should be producing our own vaccines on the continent, but we see very little traction at this point in time. We know what happened during COVID. I needn't remind anyone on this call. I would be surprised if anyone on this call hasn't had a personal experience around COVID, either acquiring COVID themselves or a family member that acquired it or an acquaintance. What we know factually around COVID is that Africa was left at the back end of the queue. So despite at the onset of COVID, so if I go back to February and March 2020, the whole world stood up and said, we must act in unison. No one must be left behind. We must act in solidarity. And what happened a couple of weeks and months later? The richer nations bought all the vaccines. They bought vaccines that were not even produced yet. They pre-bought the vaccines. So they were vaccines perhaps in phase 3 or in still under regulatory consideration. They bought the capacity ahead of the time of the vaccines actually being produced. And Africa, despite all these calls for solidarity, was left at the back end of the queue. Unnecessary lives and livelihoods were lost, unfortunately. And we as Africans and the rest of the world said, never again shall this be repeated. And I keep saying on this call, 5 years later, I can't say that there has been any meaningful or tangible progress. Why do I say that? Because I'm a very practical person. I look at the numbers. A lot of talk for me doesn't equate to numbers or action. What is meaningful to me is when I look at the trade statistics for vaccines and pharmaceuticals on our continent, the trade deficit in pharmaceuticals continues to grow. The 99% import has not changed. It hasn't gone down to 95 or 90%. It still sits at 99%. So we can have, and I'm a very frank and forthright guy, we can have a lot of talk and say, but there's so many good things happening. And yes, but are they putting score on the board? The answer is no, not right now. Now, we should also have a look now at why, what is the reason for that? And the reasoning, I'm going to propose a simple 4-point plan that Africa needs to follow, and it needs to take charge of its own destiny. There are far too many international players that are involved in determining the destiny of Africa. And yes, they are international partners and very often well-meaning and well-intentioned. But we need to drive our own storyline, we need to drive our own history, and we need to drive our own future ambition. It's no good that we leave this in the hands of others. So what is my 4-point plan? And I believe if this 4-point plan is followed, that success will also follow, and we will see an acceleration. Now, before I give the 4-point plan, because I'm focused on vaccines today, I could very easily have spoken to you about insulin or about cardiovascular drugs, or even worse, HIV drugs. When I look at our continent, which has 70% of the world's infected, HIV-infected population, and yet we import around 85% of our ARVs. How can that be? So let me focus on vaccines again. Now, there are 2 markets for vaccines in Africa. There is what we call a Gavi-UNICEF market, where UNICEF procures around 82% of the continent's vaccine volume. The funder, of course, is Gavi. And then the other 48% is procured by mainly governments on the continent through their own budgets, or a very, very small part of private sector procurement. So it's roughly a 50-48 split. You can call it 50-50 if you wish. Okay, what is the 4-point plan? Number 1, we need to accelerate regulatory harmonization, mutual recognition, and integration. It is, excuse the profanities here, it is insane that it can take you up to 6 years to complete a technology transfer, WHO pre-qualification, domestic registration, and then continental registration. What do colleagues think happens in 6 years? In 6 years, you lose the market, and your importers are in there en masse. We need to truncate truncate the timelines, accelerate the review processes, and we need priority and parallel review. There are some good signals around WHO PQ in collaboration with local or domestic DRAs, drug regulatory agencies, but we need to speeden up that process. We have a fantastic Director General of the African Medicines Agency. Her name is Mimi Dorcas. She's superb. I've met her a number of times. She's a great leader, but we need to give her capacity on the continent. One person with a small team cannot carry out this ambition. It is such an important ambition for the continent that we need to be calling all the governments in the African Union to give more capacity and resource to AMA. AMA needs then to accelerate any domestically produced product on the continent that will be used for exports into the rest of the continent. We should be able to register and approve these products in 3 months. So that's a target I want to set, if I may, that we try and do this in 3 months. But I'm underscoring, we need regulatory harmonization, mutual recognition, integration, priority review, and parallel registration for vaccines and other products manufactured on the continent for continental use. That is point number 1. Let me move to point number 2 now. Point number 2 is that charity starts at home. I said around 48% of the vaccine market happens through government procurement. These are usually the health departments of the different health ministries on the continent that purchase their own vaccines from their own budgets. We need to, with speed, set up pooled procurement mechanism on the continent. Now, Africa CDC and the head of Africa CDC with his team, Dr. Jean Cassay is his name, and he's got a team of people, including his advisor, Chanel Hall. They are in the process of putting together an internal African tender for vaccines. And they are identifying 2 or 3 immediate vaccines that the continent can start procuring. The tender hasn't been released as yet, floated as yet. I understand it is days away, and we should be looking out for that. But we should, in each and every one of our countries on the African continent, we should be encouraging all of our health ministries, departments, and procurement agencies to start supporting this tender and to start procuring vaccines domestically. We should not get into squabbles. Why is country A in Africa getting the production and B isn't? We need to create a landscape where Africa benefits and that we play to each individual country's strength. But to do that, let us not keep outsourcing 1.4 billion patients, mainly to India, to China, and to Europe, and to North America. Let's have those patients for ourselves. They are African patients. We should be producing for our own people, not relying on others. So point number 2, to summarize, is acceleration of the African pooled procurement mechanism and for it to receive wholehearted support from African health ministries and their procurement agencies. Let me move to number 3. Number 3 is, I said 52% of the market is the Gavi UNICEF market. Now, we need to ensure that where international procurement agencies, such as UNICEF, are procuring vaccines for African patients, that these agencies start procuring from African manufacturers. How are we going to do that? Firstly, Gavi has put together a $1.2 billion facility. And that facility they have called the African Vaccine Manufacturers Accelerator, otherwise abbreviated as AVMA. Now, what will AVMA do? AVMA is going to provide milestone payments for the successful pre-qualification of African vaccines, and it's also going to provide a subsidy. So in other words, if an African vaccine or a dose or a vial or whatever dosage form it presents in is procured from an African manufacturer for African patients, then there will be a subsidy from that $1.2 billion facility. There are, of course, Africa welcomes this, but there are some points that need to be refined in this package, and we are presently in discussion as I speak as African vaccine manufacturers through the AVMI, which is the African Vaccine Manufacturers Initiative. AVMI is in discussions with Gavi and other agencies around refining this package to make it more relevant and fit for purpose for Africa. We need more of those type of initiatives, and we also need to send an ongoing message, which we do constantly, to UNICEF, that UNICEF should be on competitiveness grounds looking to allocate a percentage of its volume consumption to African producers. Okay, let me go to my fourth and final point, because I said it was a 4-point plan, right? So let me go to the last point. The last point is, how does Africa acquire its intellectual property so that it can either develop its own antigens or execute its own fill and finish? How does it do that? The most practical solution, given where Africa's strengths are today in 2026, I'm not saying what's possible at an R&D level in 10 years' time. I'm looking at the here and now. We are dependent on technology transfers and technology transfer packages. But we need to make certain that these packages are fit for purpose for Africa. Far too frequently and often in the past, when I look at HIV, I look at TB, I look at malaria, when there have been technology transfer agreements, very often they don't speak to the capabilities of African manufacturers. They speak to the capabilities of Indian manufacturers, who at this point in time are more advanced in general terms. So we need technology transfer data packages that speak to Africa's capabilities at this point in time, which means there should be support for things such as the assay methodology, the manufacturing process, assistance with the API or drug substance, in our case here if it's vaccines. So we need transfer packages and their data that is fit for purpose for Africa. So colleagues, these are my 4 points. It's a 4-point plan. I believe if this plan is followed, Africa will succeed, and we can give, as I said at the beginning, acceleration and momentum to this ambitious but very important and apex priority for Africa. Africa can simply never ever find itself again in a position that it did during COVID. And if anyone on this call is doubting what I'm saying, look at where we are with Ebola, Mpox, and other outbreaks that we have seen. The best way to deal with an outbreak is place your destiny in your own hands, not in the hands of others. Madam Chair, Moderator, thanks very much. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you this afternoon. I will regrettably, Madam Faith, have to dial out in a short while. I will try and dial back in at the end. I need to get to speak to a minister shortly. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicolau. Thank you so much for that beautiful presentation. Please let's appreciate our speaker. Let's show him some love. Thank you very, very much. That presentation was very beautiful. You told us that building a sustainable vaccine ecosystem goes far beyond manufacturing alone. It goes beyond manufacturing alone. And you also made us know that it requires strong public-private partnership, strategic investment, enabling government policies, and long-term market commitment. And yes, it's okay for you to dial out and dial back in towards the end. We are so glad to have you here. You also mentioned that Africa consumes 1.2 to 1.3 billion vaccines doses each year, yet nearly 99% of these vaccines are imported. That is really a not so very good thing, which highlights that strengthening local manufacturing is very, very important, and it's a health security imperative. You also mentioned something that is quite beautiful. You said Aspen Pharmacare has grown to become one of Africa's largest, the Africa largest rather, pharmaceutical manufacturer and one of the leading pharmaceutical companies globally, which is showing that it is possible for us, Africa, to do great things. And you left out with a powerful message. You said that we should never doubt the capabilities that exist on the continent of Africa. So rather than depending on others to shape our future, we need to continue to build our own capacity, invest in our own institutions, and write our own story. We should build a story of innovation, resilience, and self-reliance. So thank you very much, Mr. Nicolau. Thank you so much for that invaluable insight. And yes, that was a beautiful presentation. Once again, let's appreciate our speaker for that amazing speech and presentation. Thank you so much. Yeah, right now we'll be moving on to our next speaker for today, in person of Dr. Ravi Ganapati. Dr. Ravi Ganapati is the Senior Director of Vaccine Process Development at the International Vaccine Institute, IVI. He has over 32 years of leadership and technical experience in vaccine research, development, and manufacturing. His expertise spans vaccine process development, manufacturing, formulation, technology transfer, and regulatory pathways across a wide range of vaccine platforms. Prior to rejoining IVI, he held senior leadership roles at Human Laboratories Biological Limited, also at Shanta Biotics and Bharat Biotech, where he contributed to the development and scale-up of several vaccines, including India's first cell culture-derived pandemic H1N1 influenza vaccine. Dr. Ganapati is an internationally recognized expert who has spoken at numerous global conferences and actively contributes to capacity building and vaccine development training worldwide. Thank you so much, Dr. Ravi, for accepting to speak. He will be speaking on strengthening outbreak preparedness and response through vaccines challenges, innovations, and lessons for emerging and re-emerging infectious disease threats. We are so glad to have you in our midst. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Faith. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts on this forum. And then I'm happy to share my talk on the topic, strengthening outbreak preparedness and response through vaccines. And some of the things which the earlier speakers have spoken, also I will be touching upon. And this will be mainly on challenges, innovations, and lessons for emerging and re-emerging infectious disease threats. This is a quick introduction about IVI, my organization, before I dive into the main lecture part. IVI is an UN-chartered international organization dedicated to accelerating vaccine R&D for global health. This is for people who don't know about IVI. Our mission is to discover, develop, and deliver safe, effective, and affordable vaccines, empowering vaccine equity, impact, and sustainability globally. And our vision is for a healthier world made possible by vaccination, available to everyone, everywhere. And we have several regional centers and country offices, as mentioned in the map, and we have more than 60 countries in WHO joined or in the process of joining IBA as member states. And we have several stakeholders and several functions as mentioned in these maps, and we have several global partners and more than 100 projects across 6 continents currently ongoing. And for more details, those who want to know more about IBI, they can go to the website listed in the bottom, ibi.int. So coming to the main topic, these are the headers probably I will be speaking about during my talk. First, I will be talking a little bit about the status emergency outbreak threats landscape in Africa, the lessons learned so far, and the gaps in the preparedness aspects in African outbreak readiness. First thing is what I want to mention is why outbreaks are becoming more and more frequent and why this matters now. As probably many of you know, 75% of emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic, and Africa remains a hotspot for frequent, more complex emerging pathogen outbreaks, maybe due to its geographical settings and many other factors, which could be the first one here mentioned below, deforestation and resultant increased human-animal interface. This increases zoonotic spillover pressure from land use change, climate shifts, and closer human-wildlife contact. The second one could be the population growth, rapid urbanization, and cross-border mobility due to travel, conflict, and displacement, which is also a major problem in many of the African regions now. And this accelerates the transmission chains. And the third one could be the antimicrobial resistance and rising zero-dose populations. And the fourth one could be the fragile surveillance and diagnostic capacity in many outbreak-prone regions. Notable outbreaks recently are, as mentioned in the top right corner, COVID-19, Ebola, Mpox, Marburg. I'll be talking a little bit more about this in the subsequent slides.
Hey, Dr.
As you can
Kabi,
see,
sorry to
yes,
cut you. I'm so sorry. Your slide is not moving. I wanted to call your attention to that. And do you mind putting
uh,
presentation mode? Yeah.
I'll probably stop and then restart the sharing 1 minute.
All right.
Can you see the slide now? Can you see my slide? Is it okay now? I think it is okay if I don't get any response. So let me move forward.
On the presentation mode.
Pardon? Is it okay
On
now?
presentation mode, it is not on presentation mode.
I can see it in presentation mode in my screen. Just a minute. I'll again do it. In my screen, it is in presentation mode. How is it in your screen?
Not yet.
I don't know, because I think when we tested, it was okay.
Do you mind allowing us to help you show your screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Please give me a minute.
Yeah.
Is it good now?
Yes. So can I move the slides myself?
I'm not sure. You might have to give us the directives to help you move it.
Okay, so you can move to the next slide. So this is the IVA introduction I spoke about. Next slide. The next one. The next one. The next one. Yeah, this I spoke about. The next one, please. Okay, this is the PDF version, I think. So I think it is not having the presentation. So okay, as you can see from this slide, in the top right, you can see from 2011 to 2021, the timeline of disease outbreaks in Africa, according to WHO's disease outbreak news website. And you can see from each year, there are so many parallel outbreaks of several diseases. But if you come to the left corner, you have the map of ongoing outbreaks and public health emergencies in Africa, where you have different diseases and the magnitude of the case numbers in different regions of Africa. And in the bottom right, you have the active threats shaping Africa's status between 2024 and 2026 in terms of response calendar. And these are recurrent infection disease threats requiring sustained vigilance, rapid response, and coordinated action across the continent. First one could be Mpox. There are different clades ongoing since 2023 with sustained transmission across multiple African countries. The second one is a Marburg virus disease starting from Rwanda in 2024, historically 50% fatality. But this had a potential for high case fatality rate for rapid spread and cross-border implications. Then you had recurrent Ebola virus outbreaks, including the Bundibugyo one, which recently started a few months ago. You have repeated cholera resurgence across multiple regions. We have Rift Valley fever recurring. There is no licensed human vaccine for this. And there is also Lassa fever endemic in many parts of Western Africa. So all these things have cross-cutting priorities for 2024 to 2026, as mentioned below in the bottom box, to strengthen integrated surveillance, early warning systems, build rapid response and surge capacity, enhance regional collaboration and data sharing, invest in vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics, and engage communities and address drivers of vulnerability. How to do that? Let's touch upon in the subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yes. So this is how the threat landscape has occurred in Africa and what we have learned from them. So starting from COVID-19, we have several successes and several failures which we have learned. Successes could be the use of rapid genome sequencing to accelerate vaccine development, including the new platform coming into focus, mRNA vaccine platform, global scientific collaboration, novel clinical trial platforms, and emergency use listing of vaccines with parallel regulatory reviews. But there have been several failures also which has been put forth, that means come forward for everyone's attention. First one is the vaccine nationalism, hoarding of stocks by high-income countries during a crisis, supply shortages and supply chain fragility, manufacturing concentration, infrastructure deficits, fragmented cold chain maintenance networks across remote regions especially, misinformation, and delayed access in LMICs. You can all remember that Africa received vaccines much later than high-income countries. And there are also responses against Mpox and Ebola, which showed the importance of local access and rapid delivery, as you can see in the small table in the bottom. In terms of procurement speed, global COVID-19 vaccine response was severely delayed for low-income states, but it has been highly improved in terms of response to Mpox and Ebola in Africa through Africa CDC leadership. Then in terms of local capacity, high dependence on raw material imports for COVID-19, there is growing modular facility presence in Africa. In terms of coordination, it was highly fragmented global nationalism in COVID-19. It was unified under continental response plans in Africa, especially for Mpox and Ebola. So from these things, we could realize that regional solidarity is essential, local production capacity is critical, and then together they are non-negotiable for true health security. Next slide, please. These are summaries from the Mpox clade 1-2B and lessons learned from that. You could see from September 2023 to September 5, 2025, almost 2 years, there have been different statuses since the detection of clade 1B until WHO PHEIC declaration was lifted in 2025. And there was an access gap for these. Two vaccines were authorized for emergency use. One is the MVA-BN Jynneos and LC16. About 5.9 million doses have been pledged with different donors. Only 500,000 doses actually delivered by early 2025. But this resulted in lower case fatality in areas with stronger surveillance, example Burundi, Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, where it was 0.3%, versus endemic zones with limited testing, where example DRC, where it was up to 2.7%. In terms of Marburg virus disease in Rwanda 2024, the speed through preparedness was much better within a 9-day response timeline, as mentioned in the small table in the left of the middle picture. The case fatality rate here was 23%, below the 50% historical average. And why it worked better? The vaccine candidate already in phase 1-2 trials before the outbreak began. Rwanda FDA reviewed data in parallel with shipment logistics. Strong existing health infrastructure was in place with mobile clinics, unified MOH and RBC coordination, and high public trust enabled rapid voluntary trial enrollment. So these two outbreaks teach us side by side that preparedness compounds. In terms of Rwanda's speed came from years of prior investment in existing vaccine candidate, trial-ready regulatory pathways, and coordinated health infrastructure. So readiness cannot be built during the emergency. It should be built prior to the expected outbreak. And pledges are not equal to delivery. Mpox showed that those pledges from donors and mechanisms do not translate quickly into doses in arms. And surveillance is a force multiplier. Fatality outcomes tracked closely with surveillance and lab confirmation capacity in both outbreaks. Vaccines work best paired with strong detection systems. Next slide, please. In terms of preparedness gap, surveillance often detects outbreaks late. Laboratory confirmation and reporting can be slow. Logistics, workforce, and delivery platforms may not be outbreak ready, and communities may not trust interventions if engagement is delayed. So all these things relate to the access inequity gap, and this is the legacy of vaccine apartheid. COVID-19 exposed these models' limits. This pattern was repeated in 2024 with Mpox response. All these things have helped us to realize that equity is now a designed requirement, not an afterthought. And there are current initiatives explicitly built to improve regional production and procurement guarantees into the design rather than relying on post hoc donation mechanisms. Next slide, please. So we have seen the outbreaks and threat landscape and what lessons we have learned. But then Africa carries the outbreak burden, but not the vaccine supply, as it has been discussed in the previous talks also. And why vaccines matter during outbreaks? Because vaccines are one of the highest impact tools available once a threat is identified. They can reduce severe disease, hospitalization, and death, enable community herd immunity, protect frontline healthcare workers in essential services, buy time for surveillance and other response measures, help prevent future epidemics. And every $1 invested in immunization returns approximately can give benefit up to 26 to 52 US dollar in return. And in terms of Africa's vaccine supply gap, Africa consumes almost 25% of globally produced vaccines, but it produces less than 1% of the vaccines it consumes, with only 0.1% of the global vaccine production capacity. And global disruptions can delay access to life-saving vaccines, as we have seen during COVID. And this results when an outbreak hits, African countries are largely dependent on external manufacturers, donated stockpiles, and delayed shipments. So equity is not automatic. It must be designed into response systems. Africa must transition from an era of dependency to structural equity. Other headwinds include funding constraints, regulatory capacity, technology transfer barriers, and supply chain limitations. And according to PAVM, 12,500 skilled FTEs needed for functioning manufacturing ecosystem in Africa, and until 2023, it was only about 2,000. But Africa, as previously mentioned, also has a core goal of achieving Union's AU's target of 60% of locally manufactured vaccines coverage by 2040. So how each of these works out, we'll describe and discuss in the next slides. Next slide, please. So we'll discuss a little bit more about the manufacturing gaps and the innovations and solution to cover that, especially in terms of Africa's ecosystem. Next slide, please. So why local production is important and what are the requirements to improve the local production in Africa? Local production, as you can see from the left box, it reduces dependence on external supply, improves resilience during pandemics and conflicts, can enable faster adaptation to regional disease threats, strengthens economic development and scientific capacity. And manufacturing is a preparedness investment. It is not only an industrial policy goal that should be kept in mind, especially if it is a health-related context. WHO's regional framework and recent African commitments reflect the view that sustainable vaccine access requires continental capability, not one country's capability. And what this requires for manufacturing to be localized in a region. The core components are technology transfer and skilled workforce, which requires human capital with advanced training for local bioprocess engineers, building local expertise in genomic sequencing, bioinformatics, specialized biosecurity training managed directly by African scientific bodies. Every one of you would agree that brick and mortar facilities are useless without highly trained, dedicated local workforce to run them. This, supplemented with quality systems, regulation, and pharmacovigilance, is a must, with reliable financing and predictable market demand, and regional procurement and policy support. Manufacturing only works when it is supported by regulation, demand certainty, trained staff, and financing mechanisms that make production viable over time. Next slide, please. The capacity gap, as you can see from the box in the left top, this is an analysis from PATH and Chai Clinton Health Access Initiative. There is a form fill finished capacity comparatively strong across several African manufacturers, but there is a lack of end-to-end drug substance and antigen production. The most technically demanding and cost-intensive step, it remains limited. Heavy reliance on technology transfer from non-African manufacturers and current transfers fall short of what is needed. Some manufacturers have solid financing access, but need stronger commercial and quality pathways. And in terms of bioprocess workforce reality, as I mentioned before, 12,500 FTEs are needed for functioning ecosystem versus 2,000 currently available. This is as of 2023. This must have improved by now. And PAVM Talent Development Workstream launched vaccine manufacturing and R&D competency frameworks at CPHIA 2023 to guide this training and investment. And upstream cell culture, purification, fill finish, and QC/QA talent are all in short supply related to plant capacity. But there are positive developments through initiatives from African Vaccine Manufacturer Accelerator, Partnership for African Vaccine Manufacturing PAVM, and WHO mRNA Technology Transfer Hubs. And there are current enabling policies in terms of WHO African Region Framework for Local Production, Gavi African Vaccine Manufacturing Accelerator, Africa CDC Continental Immunization Strategy, and regional efforts for converging around vaccine sovereignty. Next slide, please. This is the map of current and planned vaccine manufacturing on the African continent, including ownership and structure and value chain capabilities. I'm explaining. This is for your reference. Next slide, please. So coming to other things which can actually improve the manufacturability or bridging the manufacturing gaps identified. One is innovations in vaccine platforms and deliveries. Innovations in vaccine development in terms of platform technologies can shorten development timelines. And there are different platform technologies currently coming in frontline, mRNA, viral vector-based platforms, which are the newer ones. And the existing ones, you can say generation ones like protein subunit and novel adjuvants expand the response options. And as you can see in the box in the right top, there are different platforms which have different development speeds and flexibility, and examples of the diseases are given. mRNA is having a very high development speed, as everyone understands. DNA is also high speed, and viral vectors are also high speed because they are all platform-based processes. Innovations in delivery in terms of digital immunization registries, geospatial planning, stock visibility and cold chain monitoring to reduce wastage, and community health workers remaining in essential to last minute delivery all can help in improving the access to the availability of vaccines. And delivery innovation is often the difference between a vaccine existing on paper and reaching people in real time. And there is a continental immunization strategy, CIS 2026 to 2030, which sets a time-bound roadmap for strengthening immunization systems while linking them to broader health security and sovereignty goal in Africa, especially relevant for countries seeking to align immunization with outbreak readiness. And they have priorities including equity, zero-dose children, life course immunization, and domestic financing. And they also have incorporated digital transformation and accountability practices central to its implementation. Next slide, please. Continuing on the platforms and deliveries, there is also a supply chain and cold chain resilience which must be built in place. And this can include modern upgrades like solar direct derived, keeping vaccines stable in off-grid rural communities which have no constant or continuous power supplies, drone logistics to finish or last mile aerial delivery, bypassing flooded or unpaved terrain, digital inventory systems like real-time tracking to minimize waste and stockouts. And there could be innovations in accelerating outbreak responses by using artificial intelligence, genomic surveillance, pathogen sequencing, digital epidemiology, and wastewater surveillance. And there could be future technologies like SAM, self-amplifying RNA, universal influenza vaccines, pan-corona vaccines, thermostable vaccines, needle-free delivery, microneedle patches, AI-assisted antigen design, and rapid modular plug-and-play portable manufacturing using single-use technologies and automation. All these things can probably help in getting a vaccine sitting in an airport rather than sitting in an airport, which could be useless, to getting into the actual use case populations. Next slide, please. There could be next-gen manufacturing solutions, which also could be put in place. The one example is the Rwanda's attempt to keep BioNTech from Pfizer-BioNTech company in Germany, BioNTech, in terms of a containerized manufacturing platform with 12 containers as part of a setup, 6 containers for DS and 6 for DP, to have an improved technical autonomy for a fully self-sufficient manufacturing ecosystem with a single to multi-deck production and clinical trials possibility in place. There could be also modular manufacturing to improve rapid deployment in biocontainers, as example by BioNTech, and also additional modular facilities, which I'll come back to that in the next slide also, to reduce the initial construction timeline, moving us from blueprint to vial production in record time. There could be platform technologies, as I mentioned before, where you can use a single facility framework to swap genetic sequences for diverse pathogens. And there could be fast tracking fill finish facilities to localize the final packaging of imported bulk drug substances. Next slide, please. If you want to improve manufacturing, this could be one option, flexible manufacturing systems. And this is mentioned as pharma, but this can also apply to the biotech and vaccines. There are key enablers for these are modular equipment, single-use technologies, flexible filling lines, digital and pharma 4.0, where you have digital twins to improve process development and real-time monitoring and release, automation and robotics, which has huge benefits in terms of faster time to market, lower capex and operating cost, higher equipment utilization, improved quality and contamination control because everything is closed and continuous loop, and greater flexibility and resilience. And this can help in various platforms, not only vaccines, it can also help in getting personalized medicine manufacturing in a small footprint facilities, small batch clinical manufacturing, cell and gene therapy manufacturing by using single-use technologies, modular filling lines, and digital manufacturing and pharma 4.0. Next slide, please. I'm not going to talk much about this. This has been clearly explained in the first talk by Dr. Fenner. So I'm skipping this slide. This is an mRNA Tech Transfer Hub. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, PAVM has a great push given for regional manufacturing with more than 8 co-development programs in the framework announced in 2023 and more than 100 million doses per year targeted by new partnered mRNA projects on platform announced in Cairo in 2025. $1.2 billion in grants backed investment toward Africa vaccine manufacturing scale-up has been committed. And this helps de-risk technology transfer, boost regional supply, and foster African self-reliance in vaccines. Merck Foundation also has donated committed $140 million supporting mRNA tech transfer, local manufacturing, and cold chain scale-up, amplifying the PAVM's mission and impact across continent. Next slide, please. So coming to the regulatory and clinical trial and financing ecosystems after the manufacturing part. Next slide. This was touched upon by the previous speaker also. As you know, regulatory preparedness is important for emergency use listing, reliance pathways, regulatory harmonization, and WHO PQ. And there are current bottlenecks in terms of fragmented national regulatory authorities across different nations. Only 2 countries, Egypt and South Africa, attaining the maturity 3 level, WHO maturity 3 level required for WHO PQ. 20 out of 54 AU member states have signed the African Medicines Agency Treaty. 15 have so far ratified it. 1 versus 54, the goal. That means one regulatory dossier instead of 54 separate national submissions per AMA is the goal. Disconnected timelines between local regulatory bodies and the WHO pre-qualification team. Absence of harmonized clinical trial frameworks across regional economic blocks. And limited reviewers, capacity gaps, and slow approval. So all this lead to non-streamlined regulatory pathways, and this doesn't help in terms of outbreak response, because in terms of outbreak response, it could lead to fragmented approval pathways, meaning a vaccine authorized in one African country may need a fully separate dossier and review in the next, slowing exactly the kind of cross-border rollout of Mpox and Marburg which was required. Next slide, please. So this is a quick overview of WHO PQ. I'm not explaining this. This is for reference again. Next slide, please. In terms of regulatory harmonization, there have been some attempts going on, as in being the setup of AMA in force since 2021. The goal is one shared regulatory dossier instead of 54 separate national submissions. It complements the African Medicine Regulatory Harmonization Initiative and Regional Centers for Regulatory Excellence. Egypt reached WHO in 2024, WHO PQ, maturity level 3 in December 2024, joining South Africa, building the base of strong national regulators in AMA. And this regulatory support also is supported by other projects like AWAREF, which is a part of new 2-year project, CEPI funded up to $1 million commitment to ensure that review and emergency decisions are made in a faster track on multi-country clinical trial applications, supporting coordination and further fine-tuning the procedure for issuing scientific advice to developers, and to aid in the development and eventual licensure of vaccines and other health products. As you can see in most of the slides, I have given the reference links, and you can click those reference links when you are shared with the presentation for additional information. Next slide, please. In terms of clinical trial preparedness, there have been some gaps. Innovations are not only about discovering products, as most of you would understand and concur with me. It is about building the capacity to evaluate and adapt them locally. Without clinical trial infrastructure and scientific talent, African countries remain end users rather than co-developers. And African clinical trial capacity must grow alongside product innovation. And there have been some challenges on this front. One is limited trial infrastructure, delayed ethical approvals, probably due to the fragmented nature of the system. Participant recruitment might be slow, laboratory capacity might be limited, and data management capacity also is not probably advanced as needed for a fully functional clinical trial. Solutions could be to have regional trial networks, master protocols, adaptive trial designs, digital monitoring, and community engagement. And there have been innovations on this front also. There have been research preparedness program in East and Central Africa, RPECA, and there is also an ARCWA, where IBA is also part of it, advancing research capacity and pandemic preparedness in West Africa. And these are multi-center regional clinical trial networks for faster trial enrollments. There is also an ACT-CHIC project, which is a 15.3 million euro initiative pushing phase 3 trials for a measles virus-based chikungunya vaccine with the integrated genomic surveillance linked directly to clinical cohorts. And this is funded through EDCTP3 joint undertaking, where IBA is also part of this program. Next slide, please. In terms of financing, there is a boom and bust demand problem. Main thing is we need to understand outbreak readiness needs predictable domestic funding. And the challenges here would be to bridge the gap, expensive gap between technical asset transfers and commercial product launches. There is heavy reliance on fluctuating international donor aid structures, and there is also a need for continental pooling mechanisms by entities like the African Union. The historical pattern is manufacturing capacity surge during a crisis driven by emergency funding and political attention. But once the emergency ends, the demand and funding drops sharply. Manufacturers built for outbreak scale production are left without a sustainable commercial market, and high capital costs and uncertain long-term demand deter private investment in African vaccine production. And this undermines preparedness in several ways. Without guaranteed demand, manufacturers can't justify investment in idle surge capacity for the next outbreak. Preparedness requires paying to maintain readiness between emergencies, a cost with no obvious buyer under normal market logic. There is a gap between pooled procurement and milestone-based financing instruments which are designed to close. Next slide, please. So there are actions to support financing. One could be a demand side financing. There is a Gavi African Vaccine Manufacturer Accelerator AVMA up to $1 to $1.2 billion over 10 years in milestone-based incentive payments to African manufacturers, targeting more than 4 manufacturers, winning Gavi UNICEF tenders, more than 800 million doses over next 10 years. And AVMA plus proposal, which is additional $189 million direct sales guarantees for up to 70 million doses. And this can create marketing sustainability in terms of market shaping mechanisms like demand visibility, preferential procurement, and de-risking private sector investments. So pooled procurement and advanced commitments can reduce the risk. Catalytic financing can help build manufacturing capacity, and preparedness should be budgeted before emergencies occur. Next slide, please. And there could be a few other issues and actions, which we'll touch upon in the next slides quickly. Next slide, please. The main other thing would be the vaccine confidence during outbreaks. The major barriers here would be misinformation, religious concerns, political distrust, social media, and historical inequities. Solutions could be proper risk communication, community leaders getting involved in a great detail to sustain and maintain the confidence in the vaccines usage, healthcare workers reaching the remotest corners to enhance vaccine delivery, transparent safety monitoring, and social listening. And through community engagement, there could be trust which could be developed, and demand and combating hesitancy can be effectively managed. Trust determines uptake. A vaccine campaign can fail even when supply is available if communities do not trust the system. So the literature repeatedly identifies public trust, health literacy, and local engagement as central to success. The key pillars are local trust, infodemic management, that is rapidly dispelling misinformation using verified local scientific data, and culturally respectful clinical trial enrollment strategies. We must all remember that technology alone doesn't save lives, vaccinations do. And trust is the engine that drives actual vaccine uptake. And engagement should begin before outbreaks, not after they start. Next slide, please. One Health is also one of the important topic which is being discussed. As you all know, health, human health, animal health, and environmental health all have a public health angle. Over 75%, as we know before, I told before, of emerging infectious human infectious diseases originate as animal zoonotics. Early detection in livestock and wildlife prevents spilling over into human populations. Climate anomalies alter pathogen habitats and accelerate transmission. So surveillance and early warning, they can help in terms of using proper vaccine strategies. Genomic and event-based surveillance also can support faster action. Early warning can enable targeted vaccination, ring strategies, and smarter stock planning. And all this can help in preparedness being predictive, not just reactive. And vaccinations should be integrated with wildlife surveillance, veterinary vaccination, environmental monitoring, and human disease. In overall, integration across humans, animals, and environment enables early detection, faster response, and better protection for all. Next slide. Bringing it all together in terms of emergency campaigns to integrated systems, having good surveillance, having good cold chain and last mile delivery systems, having an experienced workforce in terms of vaccinators, cold chain technicians, regulatory self-trained for routine immunization, and regulatory and trial readiness in terms of standing ethics review and clinical trial site networks availability. All these things can help together to effectively manage an outbreak. Next slide, please. CEPI's 100-day mission is also one of the things which are looking at making every place in every region in the world outbreak ready by using technological readiness, by using pre-agreed plans, and to make operational readiness, that is lifting industries' manufacturing capacity so vaccines and other partners can be pre-positioned for rapid scale-up to respond to an outbreak within 100 days of identifying or discovering an outbreak happening in a particular place. Next slide, please. So in summary, next slide. There are recommendations and lessons from the outbreaks, what we have seen so far and what we have discussed so far. For policymakers and regulators, they should ratify and operationalize African Medicines Agency, invest in reaching WHO Maturity Level 3, adopt regulatory reliance mechanisms. For funders and multilaterals, they should sustain milestone-based demand guaranteeing instruments like AVMA, AVMA+, fund platform readiness between outbreaks, not only during them. Manufacturers must prioritize drug substance and adjuvant capability, not only fill finish. invest in workforce against PAVM's competency framework, and pursue WHO pre-qualification early. And for researchers and institutions, strengthen trial-ready networks and biobanking for priority pathogens, build cross-border data sharing to shorten the surveillance to vaccine pipeline. The practical lessons here would be to have building a country ownership from the start, invest in systems, not only products, use regional collaboration to reduce duplication, and focus on equity, speed, and sustainability. And if you want success, how the success can look like. Faster vaccination access in outbreaks, better routine coverage, and fewer zero-dose children, stronger regional manufacturing and supply security, and greater resilience against emerging and re-emerging threats. Success means reducing the frequency and severity of future crises, strengthening routine systems, and goal is not only to have a better response, but a stronger prevention. And finally, next slide. The key takeaways are on this slide. You should have platform technologies which are transforming vaccine development. Surveillance genomics must guide vaccine updates. And Africa has an unprecedented opportunity to become a global vaccine innovation hub. Preparedness begins before outbreaks. Preparedness and not response speed alone is what compresses timelines from months to days, as Rwanda's Marburg response showed. Vaccinations save lives if they reach people. Local manufacturing improves equity, and local manufacturing from drug substance through fill finish is the structural fix for pledge versus delivery gap exposed by Mpox. Regional harmonization and demand-side financing must advance together. Outbreak preparedness works best woven into routine immunization, and trust is as important as technology. And true health security relies on deep, non-paternalistic partnerships. And there are strategic partnership nodes, as mentioned in the right box, like Africa CDC, Team Europe, and the GET, which is organizing the webinar. So we should be prepared today to be protected tomorrow and for stronger together for a healthier Africa and safer world. And I'm stopping here, and I'll be taking questions in the future in the moderated response. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gabby. Thank you very much for that extensive presentation and well detailed. Thank you very much. Please, let's appreciate our speaker, Dr. Gabby. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Your presentation showed that outbreak preparedness begins long before an emergency occurs, and beyond vaccines themselves, you highlighted the importance of resilient manufacturing system, regulatory readiness, and sustainable financing. Also, strong surveillance, community trust, and One Health approach. You also reminded us that innovation from next generation vaccine platforms and digital technologies to regional manufacturing and technology transfer, that they must be matched by collaboration and long-term investments if Africa is truly wants to strengthen its preparedness for future outbreaks. So thank you very much for providing such a well-detailed roadmap for building resilient vaccine ecosystem and also improving health security across the continent. Thank you very much. Right now, we'll be moving on to the question and answer phase. I'm trying to check if we do have questions. Yes, there's a question for our speaker. I see Dr. Ravi is already typing. If you don't mind, you can respond to it openly. So it says, can IVI fund Jesus? Okay, the question says, can IVI fund students who want to degree in vaccinology? There's often the problem is a lack of qualified personnel in the field of vaccinology and financial difficulties to pay studies of specialized of a lot of African students. If you don't mind, you can answer that openly. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I have typed here already. There is no master's degree sponsored by IVI, as IVI mostly depends on grants, runs on grants. But IVI organizes, sponsored by different agencies, including Korea Ministry of Health and several other African programs, which are now under actually getting devised. several training programs, and this also includes some of the on-site consultations where needed. So you kindly follow and track IBA website for more details, and then you can actually contact the relevant teams through IBA website for more engagement on these kind of topics, these kind of questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gabby. There's also a question here. I don't know if it's directed to you. It says, do you think that the inability of Africa to manufacture our own vaccine is contributing to vaccine hesitancy on the continent?
I don't think so. I think it is a factor of many things which can actually, as I mentioned in my talk, probably touched upon. It's not just the only factor that probably results in Africa not using many of the vaccine which is produced. So that could be one reason, because the cost could be one of the major things, and also availability of donor things. As I mentioned, most of the African ecosystem relies on stockpiles and also donor driven mechanisms to vaccinate most of the populations. So unless this is overcome, and then unless there is regional capacity developed, which can help in reducing the cost of the vaccines being introduced, there will be difficulty in meeting the requirements as envisaged by the African Union's 2040 goal.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Gabby. Thank you so much. We've now come to the end of today's webinar. We do not have more questions. Thank you everyone for joining the July edition of the GET webinar series. We are so glad to have you join us. We are so glad to have you join us. And a big thank you to all our speakers. A big thank you to all our speakers.
Recording in progress.
Thank you very much to all our